Thank you. Good morning. Catherine Brandenburg, representing the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. As previous speakers have noted, we are opposed to the moratorium and to the amendment that has been proposed today. We do support and highly support any study that needs to be done. We'd like to continue working with the committee and with Senator Hill to make sure that, all the concerns are addressed in a study. So with that, we do oppose the bill unless it's amended. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members, James Jack here today on behalf of Liberty Tire Recycling. Liberty is the nation's largest tire recycler and is responsible for about 40% of all recycled tires nationally. We are in opposition to the bill, as many of the previous witnesses have stated, not because of the provisions that would convene an additional study on the health impacts of crumb rubber. We believe that the more sunshine and the more study, the better. We believe in the safety of crumb rubber and would have offered both to the author and to, as stated to the members of the committee, we would gladly partner with the state in supporting such a study. Obviously, our concern is with the moratorium and the elimination of funding for recycled tire programs. In the 25 years since the state passed the California Tire Recycling Act, it has been the public policy of California to support that program, and this would run contrary. Thank you.
Okay, let's bring this back to, we have one more. Sally?
Hi, Bill Allier with Environmental Working Group. We don't have a position yet on the bill, and first I want to acknowledge the bills here. When it's some could argue it should be punted to the Green Chemistry Program or Safer Consumer Product Program. I think it's important that this legislature take on an issue like this if it could take years otherwise. So I just want to say that there are times when safer consumer products, will take a lot longer to act now. On the bill itself, it's an interesting debate. I was waiting for the analysis to hear all the arguments on both sides. I'm going to recommend to my superiors that we do support the bill. It's a close call. I see the arguments on both sides, colleagues that oppose, but I think the health concerns make it so that we will support the bill, I hope, in the future. Thanks.
Okay, now let's return it back to committee. Senator Jackson, you have a question.
Thank you. Yes. It strikes me that I think there's very few people out here that say, no, we shouldn't check to see whether or not this is causing cancer on our children. And the fact that it hasn't impacted those who are applying it is good news. On the other hand, we do know that children and young people tend to be more susceptible to carcinogenic exposure than others. And frankly, as a cancer survivor myself, it is indescribable what one has to go through to become a survivor. And so I am particularly sensitive to the concerns that are expressed here, and as a grandmother as well. So from all different angles, this is a cause of great concern to me. On the other hand, or it's not really on the other hand, but I'm concerned about the fact that there have been a number of studies that have been done thus far. I think the number's 50, and I'm wondering who has done these studies. Are these studies that are either so old that with new technologies and new medical advances, we haven't caught what could be the perhaps more subtle but no less significant impacts? Have they been studies that have been done by industry? And the reason I ask that is that I would like to see a definitive study done by an independent agency who has no relationship or financial interest whatsoever in either side of this, so that we can all be assured that the results are the best science that we have today. Anecdotally, the number of 129 disturbs me. Of people who have been exposed to this. On the other hand, there have been 50 studies done, and none have shown that there is a problem. So I would ask who is going to do this study, and I have no problem with the industry paying for it, but I don't want them involved in it because there's going to be suspicion, rightly or wrongly, as to whether the results are going to be accurate and really sort of definitive, so that we can once and for all either recognize that this is not what is causing all those cancers, or that in fact it might be. And we know that petroleum products tend to be carcinogenic. I mean, and we also know that we use petroleum products almost willy-nilly. In fact, I was just at a museum, a children's museum, over the weekend, and trying to buy a little gift for my 2-year-old, and the items for 2 years old were so full of petroleum they stank, they reeked. And my hands reeked after putting them down. I thought to myself, why are we selling these products to 2-year-olds? So I'm not overly confident that the industry regulates itself well. On the other hand, we've had 50 studies and we haven't found anything. So if you could elaborate on that for me, that will kind of help direct my thoughts on a couple of the other issues that were raised,
Sure,
including that 2-year suspension period, because I know how important it's been to recycle tires. I was on the tire fire select committee when we had those 2 raging tire fires back in the late 90s. So I know that there are benefits, but not to be used if there are health detriments to our children.
Senator Gill?
Thank you, Senator Jackson, for the questions. And first of all, there's no moratorium, so we're not saying you can't use crumb
Right, but you
rubber
are
for the
saying
next 2
that we
years.
can't,
We
we'll
can't use the
suspend the
incentive
program.
amount,
Right.
the subsidy. And just to clarify, from California Against Waste comments about this is going to create a real problem, right now, turf fields in the crumb rubber amounts to 4.8% only of all the rubber recycled, tires recycled. So for a 2-year, if there were a moratorium, I mean, this doesn't call for one, there'd still be plenty of uses for the tires in that period of time. The studies will be conducted in California by the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment in consultation with the Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery, the State Department of Public Health, and the Department of Toxic Substance Control. And they shall prepare for the legislature the report. And we've outlined what they will be looking for in that. And going back to the studies that were conducted, the previous studies that we've had, in fact, the 2007 study did pose an ingestion question, but it said if you ingest 1 granule of crumb rubber, that was it. So none of the studies and the state did one on skin infection and an abrasion, but they've never been comprehensive nor looked at the more thoroughness. And you look at the 50 studies that were presented, none of them are conclusively saying that I've seen that they are safe. And when you look at the issue that I was going to say in my close to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, for looking at safety, has ordered an enforcement review of the marketing of artificial turf products for children because the agency has found lead levels in artificial sports fields above the statutory limit in children's products. So that's coming from the Consumer Product Safety Division. And in 2013, the EPA, the US EPA, posted a disclaimer on the only limited study in tire crumb rubber that they had conducted, and that release summarizing the study has been stamped with a notice outdated, and a new link has appended in their statement stating that they need for future studies to enable more comprehensive conclusions. So no one seems to have something or any study that answers the questions that we're looking for and hopefully prevent what we're seeing in some of these instances.
Well, that's very helpful. Could I suggest, too, I realize that we're looking at state agencies to do the work, but perhaps a university might have the ability to do this quicker and perhaps more effectively, and I'm sure that they would love the work, and I would just suggest that as an option.
We'll look at that, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful suggestion.
Senator Jackson, it is OWEHA who, as the bill is constructed right now.
I thought I heard mention that there were
it's going to be, OWEHA will be conducted. They will be the ones that overseeing it, but in consultation with all of the other agencies that I mentioned.
And so on the portion of it about the grant subsidies, the grant, over the last 10 years, the grants have not been given to, or at least for tire-derived products, this TDP, they haven't been given to private industry. They've been given to schools for synthetic turf. So it's the private entities are not eligible for TDP
I
grants.
understand that. My concern is that there are incentives there, whether it's a school or not. You know, they're looking for the least expensive way to create a nice experience for their students, reduce maintenance. I mean, there are lots of good reasons for them to be using this. My concern, though, is that if we haven't done a proper study, what do we, you know, where should we go with this at this point in time? And the fact that, at least from what you've articulated, we haven't really had a very definitive study. 1 grain of turf is, I suspect, what you get after you're on your way back up from diving for the, you know, as a goalie. So that obviously is not adequate. But I understand that there are financial incentives. The overriding issue to me is the health issue.
Right. No, just so
And that's surprising for me to hear from school districts saying that it's the incentive that they're more interested in rather than the comparison, put an equal. If you were to take the crumb rubber as well as the alternative products, let them stand side by side, let a school district make that decision based on that without a subsidy, and then consider in that the health of your children, just as the Los Angeles school district, the largest school district in the state, maybe the country, that they are close to it, when they've decided that they would ban artificial turf fields with crumb rubber.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with the analogy. I mean, that there's a reason we create that incentive. We're trying to do something with those tires, and
Yes, but for a school district to look at that, eliminating tires over the potential health risk for a child.
I don't think that
I'm drawn.
I don't think the school districts would agree that they aren't considering the safety of their children, and I'm sure they are. I just think at this point, we do need to do the study, and I didn't hear anybody object.
Right.
I'm just concerned that the study be done in a way we can rely upon the results as we go forward. And would you talk a little bit, and then I'll give up the microphone. The idea of taking the next 2 years, and, you know, in the legal jargon, it's sort of you've created a presumption that these are unsafe, and therefore want to remove that incentive, that financial incentive over the next 2 years. And I'm not quite sure I'm there creating that presumption, because we don't have a study that says one way or the other whether this is a problem or not. We're hopefully going to find that out with a good study within the next couple of years. So what you're basically saying is, let's start with that presumption that we shouldn't give that incentive because we really don't want these crumb rubber products to be put on our fields.
Well, I think that the incentive is the default, goes to the default position then. If you have an incentive in a school district or a city with Park and Rec wanting to reduce funds, they'll default to that, I believe, and in many cases, perhaps the school board doesn't know of an alternative or a potential alternative or are aware of a health risk potential from the product to make a decision. That's why we've also added the public comment requirement that this be in a public meeting so the public can, just as we're doing with other issues related to security and in allowing local governments and local representatives to make the decision based on the facts before them. But the idea of an incentive, and this goes to labor's concern about jobs. If you're going to put a turf field in, whether you're using crumb rubber or you're going to use another product, labor's going to be putting that in.
And what is that 4.8%? What does that do for the you know, the recycling programs? Is that going to have an impact, or is that sort of a kind of a minor marginal consequence?
I don't know what it does, but to me, 4.8% doesn't seem like a large amount.
Mr. Chair, could we find out whether that is sort of chump change, or whether it actually has an impact on the recycling program? Because Californians Against Waste, we're concerned about that, and I'd just like to have a response before I make my decision.
I don't know if I can get that to you in the next 5 minutes. What a 4%.
I'm happy to check with
But I'll check.
Recycle, Senator.
Right.
Okay, so there is no one,
Yeah.
I didn't think you were going to be able to pull that out of your hat, but I thought maybe Cal Recycle,
good, but not that
Cal
good.
Waste would be able to give us that information.
Senator Bates, you have a question.
Not to be redundant, I think Senator Jackson has raised the issue that is of concern to me. And let me say, going into this, what has been presented here by the proponents is very, very compelling, no question. But I do think when you are going to answer the question finally and decide whether this is going to be terminated in perpetuity, that we can't use this substance, then we really need to have a study that is totally unbiased. we have those who have questioned whether the studies that have been done that say there is no harm are accurate or not driven by some bias. And being a student of psychology many years ago, we couldn't get a study done, a paper approved where there was a built-in bias like a presumption. So it is about the manner in which it's a non-moratorium that concerns me. You have set up a situation at local government where it will be used in those hearings that there's a moratorium. Therefore, it is dangerous and the school district shouldn't choose that if they're given the opportunity to use it in place of the alternatives that are out there that are more expensive. There's no incentive for either now. So I think those are things I'd like you to consider going forward as you deal with both sides, Senator Hill, because I commend you. Absolutely. I think you're going in the right direction to get a final answer on this so that we have assurance that there is not health impact. But to put an entire industry under a de facto moratorium and a sense that what they've been doing has affected the health of our children, I think is somewhat unfair to the whole scientific exploration as to whether there is an issue here. So I guess I would say I'd support if amended rather than oppose unless amended. But, and I think what I will do is on this one, probably lay off till we have more discussion on how we're going to study it. And the de facto moratorium, I really couldn't support. I think you need to find another way. Frankly, if you would remove the public input at a local government, because this whole discussion will be used to disincentivize, if there's no money there on top of it, from the even moving forward with creating more fields. So there's just a lot of issues that are still, I think, undetermined in this. But again, I'm totally, with the proponents in terms of why this needs to be done and needs to be done in an expedited manner. I asked my consultant, does it take 2 years to do this? Is there a more expeditious way to bring the current information forward and test it for its veracity and its objectivity? That might be explored also, because then it wouldn't be such an impact if it was less than 2 years.
Thank you.
Senator Pavley.
I appreciate the discussion on all sides. Historically, I was supporting the crumb rubber bill back in early 2000s because of the burning tires in the Central Valley that would go on weeks and weeks and the health impacts on it. So reusing things is really appropriate. The whole discussion was on roads, though. I don't remember ever discussion on playgrounds and schoolyards and any health conversations of children. So it tells you that when you go down one road, some decisions are being made on subsidies for how to expand the usage of crumb rubber, maybe in settings we had never contemplated or would have liked to have discussed. So this is one of those little areas. So a relatively small expenditure, and I'm glad the money is grants to the school districts and the local governments. I hadn't realized that. I feel that brings up some discussion. So I'll be supporting this today and be glad to make a motion to that effect. But I assume it's going to appropriations. We need to have the subsidy question sort of really understood completely on any impacts to the program, what that does. I mean, I sort of get that accelerating of an independent health study, cumulative impacts to particularly children, absolutely critical. I don't think that's been done, but it's got to be done in a timely manner that to our best, to the maximum objectivity possible. And I agree with Senator Bates that there's always going to be some kind of bias. So challenging subject. There is an appropriate place for crumb rubber. The jury may still be out on certain sensitivities among children in playground kinds of settings, soccer fields, youth things, and if it's just about saving a few dollars, that may not be a good enough reason.
Senator Leno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate, Senator Hills, you're working with the committee to find what I think at this point is a thoughtful pathway as we move forward. And I like the amendments, in particular, the public process at the local level. That's very supportable. As a longtime proponent of the precautionary principle, in a perfect world, we would have worked all of this out before we had been moving forward. But I think in our new world of climate change and extended drought here in California, we're going to be seeing more and more artificial turf used. But we should better understand this as we go forward. So the study makes great sense, and I'll be supporting the bill today.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Yeah. As I reflect on the conversation that we have, I don't believe that I quite get to the fact that, or the conclusion that the mere suspension of a grant program makes a product bad. Because if everything needed the state grant program in order to get the good seal of forward, we'd have a whole line of people asking us to do a grant program. So we do a grant program to incentivize things. There is a pause suggested in the amendments to do that. This is a appropriation matter, so that will go to that committee. We do have a motion by Ms. Senator Pavley. Senator Hill, if you would like to close.
And I guess,
that.
and I appreciate the discussion and the conversation, and we certainly have to and want to make sure that the study is conclusive so we don't have to have this debate again in 5 years or 3 years or in any place else perhaps in the country that may have questions about it. But to me, and I think, Mr. Chair, you raised the issue. I mean, when does the subsidy, when you remove it, when the subsidy really is not to incentivize the use of a particular product because it is better or because that has not been shown, but just the fact that we're trying to get rid of recycled tires, and that's why there's an incentive and a subsidy. But to me, the purpose of having, and thank you, Senator Leno, for raising the question of having a public comment or the ability for the public to weigh in on this, is that then the facts. They can look at the facts of the situation, regardless of what they are, and the fact that we're not making it bad. We're just making and saying that it's time to look at this more carefully to see, and if they choose to go forward with it, that's their, certainly under this bill, they'd have that ability. So I appreciate the discussion and requestfully ask for an aye vote, members. Thank you.
Okay, the motion is due pass as amendment to the Senate Appropriation Committee. Assistant, please call the roll.
Item 2, SB 47 by Senator Hill. The motion is due pass as amended and referred to Committee on Appropriations. Senators Wykowski?
Aye.
Wykowski, aye. Gaines? Bates? Hill?
Aye.
Hill, aye. Jackson? Aye. Jackson, aye. Leno? Aye. Leno, aye. Pavley? Aye. Pavley, aye.
Thank you.
5-0.
I understand that Senator Gaines is not expected to come back, so we will close the vote. It's 5-0. The matter moves on to appropriations. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. Appreciate the conversation.
That will conclude the hearing from the Environmental Quality Committee. We are adjourned.